Hi, my name is Hamit Hamutcu, my background, a little bit about analytics. I got into analytics at FedEx when I was hired out of graduate school more than 20 years ago. I was very lucky because it was a great team. FedEx was at the forefront of what was being done at that time in data infrastructure and analytics. I had a great mentor. Lots of cutting edge tools that we had access to, and lots of data. A lot of operational data and customer data. I got my hands dirty with data management, predictive analytics, etc. So after doing that for about 5 years, I got into management consulting, where I spent a majority of my career, mostly as a partner at Peppers and Rogers Group. It's a management consulting company that focuses on customer strategy, but heavily driven by data analytics. I worked in various different parts of the world. I also led the analytics practice for the firm. So over the years, I probably hired, trained, managed, hundreds of. We weren't calling them data scientists at the time, but analysts or consultants, data consultants, basically. And for the last couple of years, I've been focusing exclusively on analytics capability development for organizations. So either as a consultant, also building, training programs, development programs, and there's a new initiative that we just launched, which I want to talk a little bit more about later on.
Great. Well, Hamid, thank you so much for being on Humans of Data Science, and welcome. So the last thing you mentioned was this initiative. So the Initiative for Analytics and Data Science Standards, IADSS, right?
Exactly.
More about that and kind of tell us how you started it, why you started it, and how would you define success for this initiative?
Sure. The initiative, I'm co-leading it with Usama Fayyad, who's a well-known data scientist, a rocket scientist, because he worked at NASA in the past, but he was most recently chief data officer at Barclays. He's actually the first person to hold the title chief data officer in the world when he was at Yahoo. So a great guy. I'm also learning a lot from him. So the idea is, I think, as a lot of people who've been working in the data analytics, data science field can attest to, finding talent, training them, motivating them, making them productive is the biggest part of the puzzle. I think technology is providing a lot of opportunities, but companies are having a hard time, or organizations are having a hard time making sure that the right people with the right skills are doing things. And I think maybe for the last several years, it got even a bit more confusing because as this profession, data science, data analytics, became hotter, and more trendy, a lot more people are getting into it. There's a lot more demand, etc. But to me, it seems like since Harvard Business Review names data scientists as the sexiest job of the 21st century, overnight, hundreds of thousands of people on LinkedIn decided to change their titles to data scientists. So which makes it confusing because we see skill sets, roles in organizations, etc. That's just all over the map. Just to give you an idea about some numbers, right? On Kaggle, which started with a few thousand people, maybe 6-7 years back, there are now more than 1 million people.
Oh wow!
Right. When you look at LinkedIn, there are many groups obviously devoted to big data analytics and data science, and there are several with memberships more than 100,000 people. The biggest one, big data and analytics, has more than I think 350 or so, roughly. So it's a lot of people. There's a lot of demand. But when you look at what kind of roles are being defined in companies, you can look at job advertisements, for example, to see that, and what kind of people are calling themselves data scientists, data analysts, business intelligence expert, or whatever. You see also skill sets and backgrounds from a very different a variety, right? So you could see someone with an economics degree to someone who has a PhD in machine learning. Or from an education, from a training perspective, you can see someone who graduated from a one-year data science program to someone who's taken a couple courses in Coursera, right? Or when you see the skill sets, you can see someone who's who's good at a particular statistics software package to someone who can build novel machine learning algorithms. So I'm not suggesting that everyone should be building novel machine learning algorithms, right? I mean, there's a need for all kinds of skills and hard skills, soft skills, tool skills, etc. But it's just that it feels like we need a bit more of a standardization, so we have a more common understanding, when we say a certain title or define a certain role. So that's the driving motivation, behind the initiative.
Great. So I think you might know that this question is coming. Who is a data scientist? I mean, tell us.
So, well, you ask 100 people, I think you get 100 different answers probably. A good one that I've heard is, data scientist is someone who knows more engineering than a statistician and more statistics than an engineer, right? So it's clearly a combination of things. I mean, the unicorn definition, of course, is someone who can build, go all the way from building, data pipes and the engineering, work, all the mundane work that needs to happen in the meantime, right? Data cleansing, data transformation, etc. And then building statistical data mining or machine learning models that can be scaled at production. I mean, that I think is the unicorn definition. And when if we look only for that, it's obviously a limited number of people will be able to find. But like I said, I mean, I think this is too narrow of a definition. I think there are several different roles within this, spectrum. Some might be focusing more on the business intelligence reporting kind of aspect. Another one could really be like if you're one of these fast data flow, large scale data kind of companies like either social media giant or a company like Uber or whatever, then and you really do need maybe a combination of skills. So that's putting it aside, I think the question we're trying to answer is actually how people view in the industry, or what the answer to your question is, right? So for that initiative, in the initiative we're working on, the first thing that we're doing actually is a survey, a research study rather, and a survey is part of it. We also we're also conducting one-to-one interviews. We're also present in several different platforms. We were at KDD in London, for example, where we were on a panel, great participation, hundreds of people in the room, a very good group discussion. We're going to be in Singapore next month at the IEEE ICDM conference, running a workshop. So we're collecting, input via surveys and all of these different, interactions. And we want to see what kind of roles exist in the organization as far as data analytics, data science go. What kind of skill sets are required from each, and how people go about developing talent into these roles. Like, what does a career progression look like? Like, if you're a data analyst, what's your next step, etc. So we're running this research study with hundreds of people. Majority are leaders, within their respective industries. So we and hopefully early next year we'll come up with a report that says here's what the current landscape is, and here's a suggested way of definitions like what you just said, right? For data scientists and some other roles in the data analytics spectrum.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Are you planning to do like a global survey, or are you focused on specific regions?
No, a global survey for sure. I mean, just because of the leadership position of US in a lot of these areas, I think it will be weighted towards US companies, but it will be truly global, European, Asian. We were talking to even South African, Middle Eastern, etc. So it's a large group of participants, so that we can truly get a global perspective. Okay, great. And just the last question on these standards. Why do you think it's so important that we have them? I mean, why can't somebody who took a 30-day Coursera course call themselves a data scientist? Well, maybe there, if we were living in a world where all of these people were working in isolation, doing individual work, etc., it could work. But if you're a hiring manager and you're trying to match the right person to the right job, if you're a candidate, planning on a career, progression plan, right? So how you should be developing your skills so that you can achieve, your own goals.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're an organization looking to get outside, consulting and looking for the right person that can help you with that, etc. It gets very confusing when you see this. So not everyone can go through a day of interviews, coding, hands-on working with so if you're going to just conduct an interview, right? How can you tell whether the person has actually the skills that you need for that particular job? So I think having standards and those standards being adopted by the industry is going to drive a healthier growth for the analytics. I think landscape, industry, data science industry. It's going to make it's going to create efficiency because you can do your talent management better. You can hire the right people, and you can develop them in the right way.
Okay, got it. So I saw on LinkedIn that you're an investor and board member for Alterna CX and Persona.tech. Can you just tell us a bit more about the companies and what you're doing there?
Sure. So Persona.tech is a machine learning company that uses human behavior data for mainly recommending an action. So recommender systems obviously have been in existence for a long time, but similar capabilities are now required in various different industries. Media is a great example. Recommending content to people. Advertising is a great example, putting the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. And all of these require really sophisticated machine learning solutions because you have milliseconds basically to be able to decide which ad out of an inventory to display to that particular user based on his or her past browsing behavior or whatever information you have access to. Etc. So Persona.tech, builds algorithms and algorithm libraries, for that person, for that purpose. Alterna CX is a customer experience management SaaS solution, and what they do is they help companies collect customer feedback via various channels. So this could be via email. Say you complete a transaction at your bank, you might receive an email, a message, or a call, or whatever. So and you go through a short survey. You're all exposed to that kind of stuff. And Net Promoter Score, of course, is driving a lot of this because companies want to see what their NPS scores are and how they compare to other industry competitors. So they collect all of this information. Plus, there's a machine learning AI capability that looks at existing data, either in the text formats internally or outside in social media, and they combine the survey feedback with the unstructured data feedback, and enables companies to report on it, to create action items on it. So if you spot a problem early on, you can guide your channel people, for example, take care of that on your website or in your call center, etc. Both very exciting, and I'm trying to contribute, particularly as they're trying to productize their offering.
Well, it sounds very exciting. And speaking of exciting things, the last question I have for you today is, what do you like to do in your spare time? What other exciting things do you like to do?
Well, I love contemporary arts. So I spend quite a bit of time, doing that, trying to discover new artists, go to, fairs and exhibitions and, things like that. The other thing I do, I love high altitude trekking. So soft climbing, maybe that's another way to put it. So I've done, Kilimanjaro. I've done, Everest Base Camp, Aconcagua in Chile, and several other peaks that can be that are hard to climb just because they're high. I mean, Aconcagua is over 6,000 meters.
Wow.
Kilimanjaro is about 6,000, etc. So these are all high peaks. They don't require technical skills, but they require a lot of effort and dedication and a lot of pain that you have to go through. So I love also doing that.
Wow, that's amazing. How long did Mount Kilimanjaro take?
Kilimanjaro, all in all, it's about a 6-7 day ordeal. So, I mean, you have to acclimatize yourself to the altitude. That's why you have to spend some time on the mountain. It's camping, obviously. The last day was just really, really hard. Up until the last day, it wasn't too bad, but the last day was almost a 20-hour nonstop climbing up and down at a place where the oxygen level is less than half. Is about 40% of what it is at the sea level, at what you and I are used to.
Oh my goodness! Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for making time for this. It's been a pleasure having you on Humans of Data Science.